Welcome back. In this episode, I'm going to be talking about errors and a little bit about how we can go about fixing them. So I've written up a few pieces of code that I've called errors, and I've inserted a few of the most common types of errors to see how the Python interpreter acts depending on what you're looking at. So there are a lot of different kinds of errors that you can run into, and some of them are easier to find than others. And if you're using Visual Studio Code, you can actually see that in some cases, when it's a syntax error, it'll highlight it for you and tell you, hey, there's something going on here. So here, what I have is for I in range 20, print I. What's wrong with this? Well, it's actually a very simple problem. I'm missing a colon right here because Python doesn't know what to do with it because we get this code block and it gets confused. I'll go ahead and run this. So Python 14 errors, and we can see that it tells me the file name, where the error happened, what line it happened on, which is line 5, and then it points to where it thinks the error has happened. So for I in range 20, it says, hey, I think something is wrong right here. Now we have to know what that thing that's wrong is to fix it, but if we go over here, and we know, okay, well, I'm missing a colon, I'll add that, I'll save it, I'll rerun it, the code works just fine. So syntax errors are often the easiest to catch. Now let's go and take a look at the next one, and we'll see another kind of syntax error. What happens here when I have A equals hello, but I have forgotten my quotation mark, so I haven't closed it? What's going to happen here is the Python interpreter will get to the end of line 2, and it'll say, oh, hey, I haven't found this closed quotation mark, so I don't know how to handle this. So if I run this, I'll go ahead and run this second one, and we can see that it gets an end-of-line error while scanning string literal. What this is telling us is saying, hey, on line 2, right here, or right after this, there is an error. And I was trying to close the string, but I couldn't. So we can fix this by doing this. Now notice, there's another error in this code down here on line 7. But Python didn't even get there. It didn't tell us that that was there. Once we fixed this first code and then rerun this, now we can see that on line 7, there's another error. It's the exact same error, and we can fix this relatively easily based on what the interpreter is telling us. So syntax errors are always going to break your code, and they're relatively easy to catch, but sometimes they're very minute, and they can be hard to spot visually. It can also be a problem if you often type in Chinese. For example, if I am in Chinese and I type a comma, Python will treat that Chinese comma differently than this comma. And that causes all sorts of errors, so be very careful with that. So let's look at the next example here, where we have an error that's not a syntax error. And you'll notice there is an error here, but the program that I'm using doesn't highlight it because it can't tell until the code actually tries to execute what that error is. So here I have an index error. So in my list I have 6 items, and if I try to get whatever items at the 200th index, this is an index error. That index doesn't exist. Similarly, we already saw a key error when we talked about dictionaries. If I look for Roger in this dictionary, it doesn't exist. There's also another type of error, which is a 0 division error. If you try to divide something by 0, it doesn't work. So if I run this code, the first thing it'll do is it'll say, hey, that index error is out of range, so I can't run this code. I'll go ahead and just comment this out so it won't run. I'll save it, and I'll redo that. And now we get to the next key error. I'll comment that out, and then from there, we'll see this 0 division error. Now, all of these different errors have their own names, and it's important to get familiar with what they are, because we can actually start to deal with these relatively soon. So if we look at the next piece of code, here in errors 4, we can see how we might actually deal with these errors if we don't know beforehand that they're coming. Let's say we have created a dictionary out of information from a file, so we don't a priori know the data that's inside of it. So what we can use is what's known as a try and except structure. So here we say on line 5, try, person equals my dictionary, Peter. Now we know Peter is not in this dictionary up here, so we're going to get a key error. But we only know that because we've defined this ourselves. So I can say accept a key error. So it says if we get a key error, run this code instead. Now, so if I run this, what we'll see is it'll say person is not in dictionary. Great, that worked just fine. We can, and I don't necessarily recommend this, just do a generic try and accept. So if we do that, it'll still work, but it's always best to specify what the error is, because you can handle it in a way that's unique to what the error was. So for example, if you end up getting some completely unexpected error, you might want your code to break still so you can fix whatever the problem is. So that's a little bit about dealing with errors and handling them. In the next episode, we're going to talk a little bit about collecting our code into functions to make our code writing process much more efficient. I'll see you next time. Thank you.